Hello again, IED students. Today we're going to be walking through 4.2, which talks about additive and subtractive solid modeling. So 4.2 focuses on model creation. I will be bouncing between this presentation and Autodesk Inventor to demonstrate how to create models in Inventor using additive and subtractive processes. So let's get started. First of all, solid modeling, as we talked about previously, is a type of 3D CAD process that represents the volume of an object and not just its lines and surfaces. This is different than some of our technical drawings that we've done because even though we have shaded some of our drawings, we've mostly had some wireframe models. So we haven't had anything that truly represents the volume of objects so far. Okay, so like I said, a wireframe model does not give the viewer an idea of surface appearance, and it also doesn't provide information about mass properties. So wireframes are not solid models. Now, solid models show how an object's surface appears and provides information on surface, area, volume, and weight. So solid CAD models are the result of additive or subtractive processes. So all models use either adding material or subtracting material to create virtual 3D representations of an object. Now they're also referred to as Boolean operations. So they're named after Charles Boole. He was an 18th century mathematician. We are not going to get too much into the history of that. We are going to talk more about the specific processes of either adding material to create an object or subtracting material. Okay, so when we talk about an additive method, that's when we have a three-dimensional object that can be viewed as the combination of two or more simple forms. So in the creation of real-world objects, this method is represented by construction processes like welding, gluing, mechanical fastening, joinery, and also 3D printing is an additive manufacturing process. Okay, so looking at the additive method, if this is our object up here, we could separate it into two separate blocks. We would have this block right here, which has a depth of 0.75 inches or 3/4 of an inch. And then we have an additional cube that could be attached to it that also has a depth of 3/4 of an inch. Okay. Now, another additive method is that we could split it in this direction. We could create this L shape as the base, which has 3/4 of an inch in height, and then add on this separate section that also has 3/4 of an inch in height. And then the third method would be to break these into individual tiny cubes. Now, we've looked at this specific method before when we looked at doing isometric drawings. That is not the ideal method for 3D modeling. I would say one of these two are definitely more preferable. Okay, so now we're going to actually walk through creating the shape using an additive method. So step one, we're going to create a portion of the part with a constant thickness. So right here, this is our 3/4 of an inch depth. So we now need to go into Inventor and we're going to create this sketch first using these dimensions. So I'm going to bounce over to Inventor and I'm going to make sure my IED project is selected. And then I'm going to go to New. And I want a standard IPT. So I'm in the English, okay, standard inch IPT. So that gives me default of inches. I'm going to choose create. This file is then going to load and give me the project part area or the graphic window. Once the graphic window loads, the first thing I need to do is actually create my first 2D sketch. So anytime we model in Inventor, it's like building with Legos or icing a cake. We start with a layer of cake with no icing, then we add icing on top of it. So I'm going to start by baking the first layer of my cake. So I come up to this upper left and I choose Start a 2D Sketch. As you can see, I get this crazy yellow box, and these represents the different planes that we can draw on because we're working in a three-dimensional area. Now we're going to start on the XY plane because we're building out. So I'm going to choose my XY plane, and it's going to rotate and give me a center axis. Now, if I bounce back over to my presentation, I know that I'm creating this shape. Now, a couple of things I can do. The shape is essentially two rectangles put together, so I can use the rectangle tool, or I can use the line tool. I'm going to choose to use the line tool. So I'm going to come up here to line, and I am going to make sure you can see how that line got a little wobbly. I need to make sure my lines are straight as I am clicking through to create this shape. Now you'll notice I am intentionally avoiding those center axis lines. That's because I'm going to add different types of dimensions to this later. So right now I have these funny boxes that show up. That's because those are telling me the different things about my drawing, and we're going to discuss those later. So now back over here, I now have to add the measurements or dimensions to my specific drawing. So if I'm looking at these overall dimensions, I can clearly see that I have a height of 1.5 inches. This section is 1.5. This is defined as 3/4 of an inch, and then we have 3/4 of an inch over here. So I'm going to come back into Inventor, and I'm going to grab my dimensioning tool, and that's right up here in the constrain ribbon. I'm going to hover over a line so it changes from green to white, click, and drag my mouse out. I am not holding onto my mouse button right now. I clicked once and let go of the button. So now I am dragging this out, and I'm going to click a second time, and I'm going to type in 1.5 for my measurement. Now I don't have to type inches or anything in here because it defaults to inches. So the computer brain automatically says I'm in an inch drawing, therefore any number that I type in is in inches. And I'm going to hit enter. Now this just rapidly expanded on my screen because that object was actually very tiny. So I'm going to use my mouse wheel, and I'm going to zoom out and recenter this in the center of my screen. Now by pushing on the center wheel of the mouse, I can get that pan tool, which allows me to recenter. Coming back over here, I now need to have 1.5 across this edge, and then 2 3/4 of an inch dimensions. So I'm going to follow the same procedure, click on the dimension tool, hover over the line, drag and pull away, input 1.5. This line needs to go to 0.75. We have 0.75 here. And then I believe my last one, let me double check. Okay, we can assume that this is also 0.75 because we've dimensioned everything else. So if you come back into Inventor, it does say 2 dimensions needed. But when I put this in here, it's going to say it's over constrained. What that says is that these other measurements that I already put in already determined what these measurements are. So there's no other dimensions that I can add to this, because if it's in parentheses, that means it's a driven dimension. It means it's automatically assigned based upon the other measurements in the drawing. So now that I've fully dimensioned this, I'm going to hit Finish Sketch. I'm going to zoom out and recenter this, and we're going to bounce back over to the PowerPoint. Okay, so what we did was we went through and we did step 1, and then we sketched this portion right here. So the next thing we have to do is we have to extrude the shape to the appropriate thickness. So remember that thickness that we identified was 3/4 of an inch. So now I'm going to bounce back over to Inventor, and I finished my sketch, and now I'm going to add a feature to it. So we built the layer of the cake. So we baked our cake. This is just plain cake sitting there, no icing. When we add a feature to it, it's like we're adding icing to the cake. So I'm going to hit Extrude, and that automatically identifies my sketch as, hey, this is an object I can pull out into the 3rd dimension. So I'm going to change my distance to 0.75. Again, it defaults to inches. I don't have to type that in there. So 0.75 and choose OK. So I've now extruded this surface to be that 3D rendering and added that feature to my first sketch. Now, if you look over here in the browser window, you'll notice that we have Sketch 1, which is right in here, and we also have Extrusion 1 built in on top of it. So Sketch 1 and then Extrusion 1 consumed Sketch 1. So our cake is now underneath the icing, just like it should be. Okay, so now that we've extruded that surface, okay, we are now going to add a portion of the part with a constant thickness. So we have to add that cube. So we have to apply a sketch plane to an appropriate flat surface. That's going to be the front surface. And then we are going to sketch and dimension a shape to represent that cube on the surface right here. And we're going to then extrude that surface. So we're going to add a sketch, we're going to create this cube, and we're going to extrude it. So it's the same principles again, just repeated. And you'll notice that with 3D modeling a lot is that it's a repetitious process. Okay, now I have 2 ways that I can create a new sketch. I can either right click on the surface that I want to create a new sketch on and choose New Sketch, or I can choose Start Sketch, and it automatically defaults to that front. Either one works. So now this time I am going to grab my rectangle tool. I'm going to start in this bottom corner with a green dot, and I am going to come up and out from that corner. Now, once I have that, I have to change the sizes of these 2 edges. So I'm going to go 0.75 with my dimension tool, and 0.75 with this dimension tool. Now you'll notice that all of the edges are purple. That means they're all constrained. So if you'll notice down here it says fully constrained, nothing else I can do here. So I'm going to choose Finish Sketch. I'm going to go to Extrude. The computer automatically identified that area as what I was trying to extrude, and it remembered that previous measurement. This is typical of Inventor for it to remember the number you typed in last. For us, that's pretty convenient because we're using that same distance again. So I'm going to hit OK. And you'll notice that now I have an extrusion 2, and sketch 2 is tucked in underneath it. Okay, and we've completed this part. So now we have 2 features and 2 sketches to create this part. All right, so now we're going to take a look at a subtractive method of modeling. So an object can be viewed as the remainder of a solid block. That means we make a giant block and start cutting things away to create our model. Now this represents processes like milling, drilling, turning, or grinding. CNC routers use this method. So this is a way that we cut away material to create our final product. All right, so if we start with a giant block like this, we can then remove bits and pieces to get to our final block. As you can see in these 2 methods here, it's just a matter of identifying what we need to remove from where. Okay, so we're going to work with the same model, and we're going to complete a subtractive method instead. So we're going to create a rectangular solid to enclose our object. So we are going to just make a giant block inside of Inventor. And we're going to start by sketching a 2 2¼ by 1½ inch rectangle. And then we're just going to extrude that to 1½ inches. So let's bounce over to Inventor. This is our additive, so I'm going to go File, New, again English, Standard Inch IPT, and I'm going to hit Create. I need to start a new sketch. I'm going to choose my XY plane again, and I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. I'm going to draw my rectangle, and then I'm going to pop in the dimensions 2.25 and 1.5. So grab this dimension tool, click on the top line, 2.25. Zoom out, grab my dimension tool, come over here, and 1.5. So now that I have that, I'm going to finish my sketch, zoom out, and we are going to extrude that sketch to a depth of 1.5. And I'm going to hit OK. So now I have this cube right here. So let's bounce back over here. So we've gotten to this point. So now I'm going to go and I am going to remove material from the front face. So I'm going to create a new sketch on the front face and then sketch the shape that I want to be removed and then extrude that shape. Okay, so you can see before where we made that small cube, we're actually going to make the opposite shape of that. So what they did here was that they made this cube and then extruded that cut away that other area, which is exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to put a new sketch on my front face by right-clicking and choosing New Sketch. I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, starting at the green dot in the corner. I'm going to draw myself a little square, and then I am going to dimension this to 0.75 and this to 0.75. Okay, so now that I've completed that, the other thing that I want to do, I'm going to drop my dimension tool by hitting the Escape key on the keyboard, and I want to make sure that everything is connected here. Looks good, so we're going to hit Finish Sketch. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my extrude, and I actually don't want that area. I actually want the area behind it, and you can see it did not auto-select it. That's because we don't have lines that connect through that. So I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to edit my sketch. So I'm going to go right-click, I'm going to edit sketch, and I'm going to grab my line tool, and starting at this corner, I am going to come across just like this and add those lines. Okay, I'm going to hit the Escape key. All right, and you can see right here we have a bit of a problem because this line is identifying as an entire line segment. That's going to be an issue when we go to cut, because if I hit Finish Sketch and I hit Extrude, okay, it picks that up. Now, obviously, this is coming out, and I want it to go in. Now, right now, it's set to distance. That's a problem. We do not want it to be set to distance. Well, we want it to be set to distance, but we want it to be 0.75. I also have to change this to cut. So I choose the direction in, make sure it's set on cut, and then I put my distance as 0.75 and hit OK. So now I'm left with this block shape. And now I have to cut this last corner. So we're going to move the upper right corner by again creating a 2D sketch on the front. And then we're going to sketch our cube, and we are going to use the extrusion as a cut to create that shape again. So I'm going to come to this front face, right click, New Sketch. I'm going to choose my rectangle tool, go from the top right corner, pull it down, dimension this to 0.75. Dimension this to 0.75. I'm going to choose Finish Sketch. choose my extrude tool again. Again, I'm choosing cut, and it changed the direction for me. 0.75 is my depth, and I'm going to hit OK. And now I have my final shape using a subtractive method. All right, now that we've taken a look at additive processes and subtractive processes, we are now going to combine them together. Most frequently, when we're creating a 3D model, especially in Inventor, we have to use a combination of both additive and subtractive. There is no right or wrong way to generate a solid model. However, the process that uses the least number of steps is what we refer to as the most efficient way, and that's always our goal. Now, as you begin drawing, you're probably going to have a lot more steps than what you would once you've practiced with Inventor for a while. So don't be afraid of having too many steps. Just remember that the most efficient way is always the best way. So right now we're going to go into Inventor, we're going to create a new model, and we are going to go through the combination method. So go ahead and follow along with me. If you need to pause the video, feel free, of course. So I'm going to bounce over to Inventor, and I'm going to make sure my IED project is selected, and I'm going to choose New, English, Standard Inch IPT, and we're going to hit Create. Once that loads, we're actually going to select the XY plane. So we're going to start a new sketch, and we are going to choose the XY plane. Once we have that grid, we're going to start by creating this rectangle right here. Now these dimensions are really hard to see, so it's actually easier to come into the PowerPoint and zoom in to 200%, and I actually go one past that. I just hit zoom in after that, so I can get really close and read these dimensions. So we're looking at this rectangle, and it's 2 inches by 7 inches, and we don't have an extrusion width. I just fortunately know that it is 5 inches. So we're going to come back over to Inventor and grab our rectangle tool and click. Then we are going to dimension 2. Again, it's going to expand, so we're going to zoom out by 7. Once we hit that 2 by 7, we're going to finish our sketch, hit our home key to be able to recenter in our screen. We're going to extrude. Now I'm going to change my extrusion direction away from me just so it matches the visual that I'm working with. It's not incorrect if you don't change the direction, it's just a tidy drawing habit. So I'm going to extrude by 5 and hit OK. I'm going to reorient with my home key, and that has created the base of that. If I go to my next step, my next additive is to add a rectangle to the top surface of here and then extrude it. Again, we don't have that extrusion amount, so I'm just going to go up about 3 inches. So to create a new sketch, I'm going to right click and choose New Sketch. And once I am here, I'm going to recenter this. I just pushed on my mouse wheel, and then it allowed me to get the pan tool and pull down. That's another option instead of the hotkeys. So I'm now going to grab my rectangle tool, and I am going to start in this corner, and I'm going to come part way down. I don't want to come all the way down, because if I attach this edge to this edge, it's going to over constrain it, and I'm not going to be able to get the dimensions that I want. So I'm going to grab my dimension tool, and I am going to dimension this to 2, and then I'm going to dimension this side to 5. It's going to align itself with that edge, which is perfect, exactly what I want. So I'm going to hit Finish Sketch. I'm going to choose my Extrude tool, and I'm going to change that to 3 and hit OK. So now I have the exterior L shape. The only things that I'm missing are the cutout here and the cutout right here. So I'm going to start by coming down here. I'm going to right click and go to New Sketch. And I am going to again grab my rectangle tool. I'm going to start from this bottom edge and come up a bit. I'm going to dimension this to 1 and then this side to 3. Now the real kicker is that I want to make sure that this is centered in the base of this 3D model. So with my dimensioning tool, I'm going to click on one side of the feature I've created, or the sketch I've created, and then I'm going to click on the edge of the already existing model, and then bring it down, and that's going to allow me to create a dimension between those two lines. Now I know that this total distance is 5, this is 1. If I want it centered, I need 2 inches on either side. So all I need are those 3 dimensions, and I'm going to hit Finish Sketch. We're going to extrude and choose our cut feature. Now, Inventor did not auto-detect this surface. That's no big deal. I'm just going to click on it. I'm going to change my distance to all, so that way it cuts to the bottom of my model. And I'm going to hit OK. So now I've done that subtractive portion of the model. My last subtractive portion is up here. So I'm going to right click, new sketch on this surface. I'm going to again push and hold with the wheel of my mouse. And I'm going to grab my rectangle tool one more time, starting on this edge, and you can see I didn't quite get the edge there. So I'm going to hit escape, and I'm going to come back here, make sure I've got that edge, and I'm going to draw a rectangle. Now the dimensions for this guy are 1 inch by 3 inches. And the distance from this edge to this edge is 1 inch. Once I have those in place, I hit Finish Sketch, choose Extrude, I'm going to select Cut again, select that area, change my distance to all, and hit OK. So now I have this file already created. I'm going to go File, Save As, and then I'm going to make sure I'm in my 4.2 folder in IED, and I'm going to save this as Combinational Practice, last name, first initial, and I'm going to tag it as video so I know it's the one I did for the video. And then I'm going to hit save. And then you would slide that into the hand-in folder. If you are a student who is not with us and you are doing this because you are absent, you can feel free to upload that IPT file to Classroom so you can get it to me sooner if you're going to be out for a few days, or just wait until you return and put it in the hand-in folder. And that is the end of combinational modeling.